So tonight, the topic is going to be tech and sustainable fashion. So how many of you guys in here are all about sustainability? Let's see. All right. Okay, so I'm actually going to take this moment and once again introduce everybody to our panelists. This is Jill, Veronika, Kristen, Celine, Mikaila, Ira, and Scott. All right, so please give us a round of applause for the panelists, and I'll hand it off to Jill.
Thank you, Connie. Welcome, everybody, to our very large panel. This is the largest panel I've ever moderated. It's a little daunting, but we are going to make it work. These are experts in the field of sustainability and technology. I'm going to actually go down the line, have everybody introduce themselves, and tell a little bit about what they do on a day-to-day basis and the companies they come from. Woo! Sorry about that. Again, I'm Jill Manoff. I'm the editor-in-chief of Glossy. We cover the evolution of fashion and luxury and the beauty spaces as a result of digital and technology. And next to me, we have Mika Harbick, and she will tell you more about herself and what she does at Thursday Finest. There you go.
Hi, everyone. So at Thursday Finest, we make custom knitwear all on demand and at scale. So that means that every item we create, we start with no inventory. So it's sustainable from the start of that item to the completion. So everything is made on demand to your size, color, different categories of preferences, and you can even add text to it. So it's something that we enable you to customize every product we create, from accessories to our latest launch, which is sweaters for men, and into apparel. So it's sustainable from the moment that we create it to the fact that we make it from merino wool, and then we help you dispose of it afterwards as well. So we can talk more about that. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kristen, and my brand is called KROMAGNON, and we are located in New York City. We do men and women's, and it's sustainable because we use recycled and upcycled fabrics, and also blended with hemp and tencel, and a lot of upcycled pieces from India, hand woven, because we use artisans, and everything's produced in New York City.
Hello, everybody. My name is Celine. Celine Semaan. I'm from Slow Factory. What we do at Slow Factory is we print NASA images on silk, and the silk is ethically sourced and it's biodegradable. And we print images of the earth and the universe, and we raise awareness about social and environmental change. And as well as doing that, we also work with jewelry. We create jewelry made in New York City. Our scarves are made in Italy, in a family-run business in a silk mill out of Como in Italy. And I kind of stumbled by accident into fashion and into sustainable fashion, as I wanted to archive images of NASA on fabric. And the process needed to be sustainable, as the images are images of our planet and our universe. And recently I started an apparel line called The Library, where we work with upcycled and natural fibers and fabrics. And we recreate classics using these sustainable material.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mikaila Brown, and the name of my company is the Common Thread Project. I'm a fashion anthropologist, and what that basically means is, how many of you are familiar with Anthony Bourdain, the celebrity chef? So what he does for food, I do for fashion. So the same way he would say to you in Madrid, this is what they eat, this is why they eat it, this is where you should eat when you go to Madrid, I do the very same thing, but for clothing. And I support local designers. I currently offer shopping tours through Airbnb, and I'm here today because a lot of the designers that I feature in Harlem are local African designers, and they are sustainable designers.
My name is Ira Levy. My company is Levy NYC. I'm a lighting designer and event producer for large-scale shows and architecture. So I create a lot of retail environments for brands utilizing sustainable technologies such as LED and different technologies.
My name is Scott Luxor. I was the director of the New York City Green Festival last year, and it was an annual event at the where we get about 20,000 people coming through, and it's basically everything green that you can imagine. And last year I had the opportunity to help to create a sustainable fashion show at the event, And that's something that, this an area of green that I am actually very passionate about, since clothes are sort of a common thread we all have together, right? So that's what brings me here today.
Let's just jump on in with some of the, I would say, misconceptions about sustainable fashion. Right now, sustainable fashion, I mean, it's hard to differentiate. You can't say that's not sustainable. Like, it's very chic. Every brand is going there in some capacity or inching their way into the territory. Hopefully they are. But what would you say are some misconceptions right now and some things that you are trying to kind of squash or that you have effectively squashed in the last couple of years?
I think for me, can you guys all hear me? All right, perfect. I think for me, when I thought about sustainable fashion before, I imagined some Harvard graduate who went to Africa on holiday and found this amazing bag maker, and then owned and operated a line where that African designer got a small proceed. But I think there's a lot of local designers, in particular in Harlem, that they own and operate their own businesses, they keep all of their profits, and they're still as sustainable, but they're not marketed as such. So I think that in many ways, sustainable fashion has pigeonholed itself into this kind of elitist type of brand idea. And there are a lot of local designers that are doing the work, but not getting access to the market or the title, the benefits of the title.
Let's talk about that, not marketing themselves as sustainable. A lot of brands think that's kind of dangerous territory because when they call out that they're being sustainable, others, those just looking in, are going to say, you know, well, that's not sustainable, and they'll be able to call out something that's maybe not quite there. So in my book, any step is a good step in that direction, but brands are hesitant. What would you guys, are you guys seeing the same thing?
Yeah, I think the other part of that is sustainable. I mean, a lot of brands notice that if you say sustainable as part of your brand, it actually makes people uncomfortable. It makes your own buyers who do support sustainable fashion sometimes uncomfortable. So we've actually started talking about our products as planet-loving, you know, planet-loving people, planet-friendly products. And to your earlier question, we're actually I mean, a common misconception and a common thing that people look at as sustainability is like natural dyes, you know, tracking your whole supply chain, making sure that, you know, the farmers and the animals, all of that are treated fairly, and there's so many other components of it. For us, we're doing a lot of that in post-production, but we're also tackling the biggest problem, which people don't even talk about in fashion, which is the consumer waste and pre-production waste. So if companies are producing a lot of product and they only sell a small percentage of that, because you can't figure out which store needs what color and what size for the person at that time, which is a very difficult problem to solve, you're actually throwing away all those garments. And that's a huge problem. And as great as it is to solve all the other problems as well, we also have this other problem. And so we're really passionate about talking about that, because making something on demand without having that inventory is a huge thing that we're solving in fashion.
Speaking of, I have a fun fact. H&M just said they had $4.3 billion worth of unsold clothes. That was just released. That's wild. So obviously there's the, somebody in the audience asked, what's your definition of sustainable fashion? Definitely want to get everyone to weigh in on that, because obviously it's the clothes that are going in the landfill. It's the polluting manufacturing processes. But let's kind of hear what else goes into this category.
If I may jump in, I would say that sustainable fashion should be accessible. And I agree with you. I wrote a piece recently in The Cut about sustainable fashion and colonialism. I come from Lebanon, and before Zara opened their doors or their stores in Lebanon, the notion of sustainable fashion was completely different, and everyone had a piece of clothing that was custom made by the local seamstress. Everyone knew who made their clothes. And then in 1997, Zara, after the war ended in Lebanon, Zara, H&M, Mango opened up their doors and their stores in Lebanon. And it kind of disrupted a lot of the local economy, the local artisans, and now we have a going back to our roots kind of thing, like very hipster vibe, and you know, and I don't say that with any ounce of cynicism. I think hipster culture sometimes tends to have a good initiative by going back to the roots or going back to where things were made. And so in Lebanon, we have some of that going on in Beirut. And I think that sustainable fashion is how long can you extend the life cycle of the product that you're wearing before you throw it away, before you discard it, before you give it to somebody as charity. I think charity, the notion of charity is anti-sustainable. I don't think that we can think of ourselves as charitable when we are discarding of such amounts of clothes that are being shipped to landfills in Africa, in the Middle East, in Vietnam, and they are clogging up their economies, they are clogging up their systems. That is, for example, not sustainable. What's sustainable to me, I think it's with any kind of lifestyle that you have around sustainability, whether it's around the food that you eat and you're conscious of it, it's also around the clothes that you put on your back, and it's also around the products that you choose to put on your face, on your hair, and on your teeth, etc. So it's a holistic approach, I would say.
Absolutely. How would you define it, Scott? I'm going to put you on the spot.
It's a good question. It is kind of a broad question, but what I've seen through events at the Green Festival and people that are so passionate about it, I'd say it's about it's an attitude, I think, about what you're wearing, and it's an attitude about why you're wearing it. And in fashion, there's an attitude about this artistic statement, which is part of it, but I think the sustainable part undergirds it in that it says, be conscious about what you're wearing, and be conscious about why you're wearing it, and be conscious about where you're getting it from, and like you're mentioning, like how long do you want to make this last? Is this just a commodity that you're going to throw away, like your paper cups or something? And also think about where's it going to go when you're done. And I try to do that as much as I can, but even with what I feel is a semi-conscious approach from what I do is most of my life. But I feel like when I try to do it, it's still, I'm trying to find sourcing that I can afford, or I'm trying to find a place I can go to buy it. Obviously you can thrift, you can go to thrift stores and make your way through things, but the holistic picture isn't there.
Yeah.
And I think all of you wonderful people here are contributing, and all of you out there are contributing to a different consciousness about it. And there's no like one answer. I think it's everybody having this conversation and having the right intention about it.
Absolutely.
To me, I think having that sustainable intention is going to get us there more than anything else.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's more like a mindset. You're never going to say, I did it, I'm sustainable. Like, it's not an end point. It's always kind of a work in progress and kind of something that's on your mind. What were you to say, Kristen?
I wanted to say that when I work with sustainable fabrics, and there's a lot of greenwashing out there where they say something's sustainable but is not really. Like, I try not to use bamboo, because even though the plant itself is sustainable, but the making of bamboo fabric is not very sustainable at all. They use a caustic soda to break down the fibers in order to make a rayon. And in that process, it's not a very good process for the environment. And also, you have to think about what other waste out there. Like, there's so many plastic bottles in the ocean right now, and Flint, Michigan, they're using like millions of bottles each and every day. And there are brands that are coming up, like eyewear brands and clothing brand that's collecting these plastic bottles from Flint. And there are also other companies doing that as well around the world. Like, a lot of my pieces are made from recycled plastic bottles collected from India and China. And there's also companies doing it in Haiti. And that's also very important, to collect waste from the ocean and from the landfills, and to make something out of it. And especially if it's biodegradable, that's the best way to go.
Let's talk a little bit about that kind of greenwashing, or maybe where you think that you're doing something that's amazing and it maybe is not so amazing. It came up in recent weeks when all of the designer brands were they were going to faux fur, and some people were saying, the manufacturing of faux fur isn't the best. It's not the best. It's not sustainable usually. So maybe it's kind of like it's getting rid of animal cruelty in favor of this other process. What's better? And also, Celine and we've talked about the fact that fashion activism, and people are wearing clothes to make a statement, and those pieces are probably they may be $5 or $2 t-shirts, and they're probably not made in the best way. Can we talk about kind of weighing the two, I guess, or, what do you think?
So that's a very good point. So I don't know if you guys have seen the Dior t-shirt that says we should all be feminist. And let's start there. It's a t-shirt that, says a very positive message. It's a sentence board by Natishi, what is her name? Oh my gosh, I can't even say her name because I always butcher her name. But anyway, it comes from a book that says we should all be feminists. It's the first, it's the title of the book. And the t-shirt is $700 from imported material. And where is it made? We don't know. It's imported. Literally, that's what it said on their website. And when we look at a t-shirt like that, yes, of course, this is fashion activism. It is saying a statement, using fashion as a medium for social change, using fashion as a medium, as a canvas for a message, a billboard, if you want. But when you dig deeper into this and you really realize that to make this t-shirt, someone had to pay the cost of that t-shirt. Someone had to pay the cost of picking the cotton, taking the cotton to the mill, turning the cotton into fiber, weaving the fiber, bringing the fiber to the factory and cutting and sewing these t-shirts, taking those t-shirts to the shipping place. And I'm also eliminating a lot of middlemen along the way. But what I'm trying to get at is that the traceability of that t-shirt, going back to where that t-shirt was harvested to all the way to where it was made, distributed, and who it is being worn by, who is wearing this $700 t-shirt. And again, the democratization of fashion activism is to say this is not positive for our environment. It's not positive for the women who have weaved that t-shirt. And when you say, we should all be feminists, who is allowed to be feminism? And again, it goes back to colonialism. Again, it goes back to the root of what fashion is about. Fashion is about elitism, it's about control, and it's about power and access. And who can access that t-shirt? Some people are gonna be wearing the counterfeit of that t-shirt, the H&M version of that t-shirt, the Forever 21 version of that t-shirt. And some of them are going to be wearing the Dior version. And again, when we look at fashion activism, it's important to see that since the last elections, it has gone mainstream. I've been working in this field for years. For 6 years, I've been trying to infiltrate the fashion industry with this concept that fashion has meaning and meaning creates action. People were like, no, that's not real. Until the last elections, until the little panties down the runways that said, no ban, no walls, until they were able to implement some of those messages down the runway and be able to have a bigger message that said that was able to say, okay, my political views are important. I'm going to use fashion as a canvas. But when you do that, you have to also be able to think about sustainability, and sustainability on human lives and sustainability on the planet, both equally.
Go ahead, Ira. Yeah. Go, Celine. Sorry, but
I think the important point that in the definition of sustainability is the fact that it just goes around in a circle. So that if you create something and there's a plan, or there's somehow or another that it's going to continue in some way or end up being recycled or reused, or whether it's whatever product it is, you've kind of fulfilled your goal as far as, so it doesn't matter what the product is made out of. If you decide that you wanted to make a pair of clothes out of plastic, if that clothing was then reused and used somewhere else or handed down, I think that probably most people here don't throw out clothing. Is that correct? People either use it, or they hand it down to somebody else, or they donate it. So I think there's a good amount of people that are conscious of fashion. It's sustainable in a certain way in certain communities, because even in a community where there is no money, you're going to see that nobody takes any clothing and just puts it in the garbage. It's always going to be handed down to somebody else.
let's mention, there are other ways too. Definitely some emerging business models, things like the the sharing economy, and there's the opportunity to rent clothes and to borrow from each other's closets. What kind of models or what are you seeing that really is promising in this space as far as a new business model, if you had to say? Anybody? Go ahead, Mikaila.
I just want to push back a little bit because I think that's one of the problems with sustainability is there's such a rigid definition of what it is, and it shows up in many different ways, to your point, in many different areas. So I don't have a new example, but I'm Jamaican. You never go home to Jamaica from the US and don't bring your clothes to give to your cousins. That's sustainable fashion. And because you have to broaden the definition of what sustainable fashion is, I think a lot of times it's like, we try to make sustainable sexy, like what's the new business model, how are people doing it in new and innovative ways, but I think we have to appreciate the tradition. To your point in Lebanon, having clothes made by your local tailor, that's steeped in tradition and culture. And so I think we need to demystify sustainable fashion and make it less sexy and more like everyday, like what you're doing is probably sustainable, but it's just not called that, but it still is that, because it's still creating a cycle where it's being used over and over and over again. So that's a point I wanted to make.
Yeah, and I'd love to just pick up on that, because I think that, to your point about that shirt, it's very possible that both the knockoff and the real one were made in the same factory. And that's so the question is, if they weren't, they have $700 worth of margin to actually make it right and to pay people fairly. But the burden of proof is on the consumer. And I think that's a very stressful thing for all of us that want to be conscious consumers, because you don't know. You don't know if you're spending a lot of money, if that's actually going somewhere right, or if you might as well just spend the smaller amount of money. And I also think that because the definition is so rigid, it's, when you're in sustainability and you're so passionate about it, you almost want to say, like, that's not enough. But I think for the smaller companies, we need to lead by example with taking the bigger steps. But the larger companies, because it does take them so much to take even the smallest action, we need to be supportive of them even taking small steps. So, Pret using recyclable bottles in their UK stores, I mean, that's great, because that's a small step. McDonald's, I think they're trying to do something with their packaging that's, straws, yeah. I mean, those are small things, and we always say, like, that's not enough, but we really do need to support those big companies, because it does take them so much to take those steps. And I think that with our consumption and how we treat consumers with sustainability, I always think about it like meatless Mondays. It's like you can be vegan, but if you're vegetarian, that's still doing a lot. If you have meatless Mondays, that's still doing a lot. And we just need to encourage people to get comfortable and get in the game.
But also,
Monday. Ooh, I had no idea. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add that fashion really is not in the sustainable business, because, I mean, every year we want to have new fashions, or else we'd all still be wearing 501 jeans and t-shirts, and then that would be sustainable, and then everybody can just buy one pair of clothing and finish. But the whole concept of fashion is that people have a desire to change, and some of it is you change because that's what other people are doing, and at the same time, nobody wants to wear one type of clothing, and people want to look different and be up with the style. So there's a big part of the kind of, contradiction that we're trying to say fashion being sustainable, because people need to keep on changing their clothing.
Yeah. You mentioned, go ahead, Kristen.
I just want to add that at the end of the clothing life cycle, you never know where a lot of these pieces are going. If you think you're donating it, but it might be going to a landfill in East Africa. So it's up to the consumer to be more conscious of what they're buying and what happens to these pieces and of their clothing after they donate it. And it's up to you to find out where it's going. And if you demand to know, then that's better.
I mean, eye-opening. I always thought donating was good. Guilty. Okay, go ahead.
No, in response to your idea about a business model, I think one of the things at the festival is we always encourage collaboration, and we always encourage cooperatives and cooperation, things that you can actually create. Like all of you in this room can create a cooperative. You can create something that's grassroots. You can create something where you actually work together and you help each other get your products to market. So if you have ideas that you want to share and you want to work together, you can just create it. And I work with some amazing people that are creating everything from fabric to art design to shop spaces. right here in New York. Some of it's in Washington Heights, and some of it's in Manhattan, some of it's in Brooklyn, you never know. And so it's very empowering, though, as a business model, to be able to realize that we can just do it ourselves, and you don't have to rely on the corporate model. I mean, it's still there, it's not going to go away, but you can create a lot of change and a lot of positive impact by just getting together and doing it right here.
Yes, it reminds me of something. I was speaking with someone from Levi's a while back, and he said something to the effect of, you know, when you're trying to become a more sustainable brand and you find new technologies and new things that are actually working for your brand, if you don't share that with other brands and you don't create a community and talk about it and get it out there, you're pretty much an a-hole. Hi, Facebook. You're an a-hole. So, like, talk to me about the community and how you're collaborating with other brands to kind of talk it out and share your ideas and share what you're learning. Is this an ongoing, is it a big community that's focused on this? Are you guys friends?
Sure. So we recently partnered with Woolmark, and we've learned so much more about the sustainability of wool, mostly for its whole life cycle. So when you bury wool, it decomposes very quickly. So right now, 100% of our products are made from merino wool, and you know, they naturally, we talk about sustainability in tech and fashion, and we like to think about it as like the world's oldest technical fiber because it has all these natural benefits that are re-engineered into this natural fiber. So that's a way for us to continue with the community.
So we're doing a collaboration with Indigo Handloom. They make fabrics in India, hand woven with artisans. So we use their fabrics, and they usually make scarves and other things, but we take them and make clothing out of them, like this jacket I'm wearing, and we do a lot of streetwear. So we kind of take what's already there that they've already incorporated into their brand, but we take it in and we make it different and make it our own.
So with Sew Factory, we collaborate with the MIT Media Lab. We're actually now doing a bunch of research on the silk and how it biodegrades as a biomaterial. Again, the same thing as with wool. People are going back to these natural ways of creating fibers. There's a bunch of people working with spider silk, spiderweb silk, byproducts. We work also in collaboration with Thread International, same as you guys, I guess, with byproducts from plastic bottles crushed into powder and then turned into thread and then weaved with American grown cotton. And they create new fabric with that. We also work with a recycling facility called ICO, where we are looking into ways of, instead of donating the clothes into landfills, what are the amounts of clothes that we could turn into new fiber? And there's a whole lot of stuff in there where people think that their clothes are recyclable, but most of them contain polyester or are mixed with polyester, which is a major problem because it doesn't biodegrade and it doesn't get recycled. So when you purchase something, if it has polyester, don't buy polyester.
Just say no.
One of the things I think that sustainable and ethical fashion is getting right is that it's making fashion less faceless. So you just listed a whole litany of people who go into making that Dior shirt. And so one of the things I do like about ethical brands is sometimes you get to see the actual person making something. And sustainable fashion is slow fashion. So it's not a big factory where things are being churned out. It's an actual person with hands making things. So one of the things that we have to do in promoting community is promoting the community of the people who are actually making the pieces and putting a face on them and making them real people. So it's not just Mboktu who made this basket, but like talking about her family, talking about the issues that she's dealing with in her country, or some of the cultural things that she's putting into the pieces that she's making. It's slow enough, sustainable fashion is slow enough that you can take the time to connect with the people actually making the pieces.
I was going to add that we actually work with Fab Scrap, who you can meet in the back, because Thursday Finest is zero waste manufacturing. It takes us a very long time to fill those bags, but we do prototyping and just put some yarn in there as well. So they're a great partner for recyclable fashion.
Let's talk about some of the larger fashion conglomerates. I mean, everybody's making a big to-do about their initiatives and sustainability. And I mean, In my eyes, I mean, a lot has to do with the fact that they're getting pressure on social media and they're getting backlash on Instagram, and people are saying, what are you doing? And what are you, like, what's your solution? So, I mean, are you seeing this? Can you guys talk a little bit about to what degree social media is affecting this space?
So I think what we're seeing is positive. I think like we're basically waiting for like a tipping point when everything aligns, where the idea of sustainability becomes a little bit more cost effective. I think you want to see the brands go into it because it's a good reason financially. So the more this happens, the better it will be. So it's very much like, 15 years ago, you never heard a company talking about their social responsibility. We are there to make money. Now every company has to have some sort of type of give back into what they do, and they're putting it into art or they're putting it into something else. And okay, it started as a trend and somebody saw that it was successful and they all copied, but the final result is still what counts, which is the fact that there is some sort of give back. So if you look at the sustainability, yeah, okay, it's becoming trendy and it's something to say, but if it ends up becoming financially viable for them, and reusing fabrics or reusing things becomes more cost effective, then it's going to be a win for everybody.
That makes sense. Now, what do you guys think? We all in here say, we try to shop more sustainable. That's on our minds, but a lot of people don't. Like, what do you think that it's going to take for more of the general population to shop sustainable clothing? Like, is it affordability? Is it convenience? What do you think is kind of the holdup here?
I just want to go back to the major brands to answer that question. We are working a lot with trying to get mainstream brands to adopt sustainable standards, and sustainable standards both on the environment, like I said, and on human cost and human lives and labor. And I have to say, like, until their process shifts from a profit-driven process to a human-centered driven process, we're not going to see massive change, and it will stay in the Department of Marketing and greenwashing and so on, because the idea is to sell, and to sell its cost, and it's like the lowest price wins, and it's a race to the bottom. And unfortunately, what the customer can do, what the consumer, the people could do, and the people have way more power than they imagine they can. They're just brainwashed thinking that they have no power. It's overwhelming to think of the problems we have at our hands. But again, working in activism, working as a person who, motivates people and crowds and creates campaigns to empower people and so on, I really like to think that we have the power in who we support with our dollars. Now, I know this rhetoric has been used before, that vote with your wallet and support the local designers. But it's true, stop buying stuff. Like, just give yourself a month where you don't buy anything. Like, try it. Buy food, okay? And just don't buy clothes. Don't buy clothes for a month. And look at what the H&M has been going through right now. They have overproduced for 41 billion whatever dollars. That's because they project that they will be selling, and they create these campaigns and they create these needs, and they capitalize on our insecurities. They capitalize on the fact that we need something. We constantly need to buy something for our happiness or comfort and so on. But when we try to actually being an activist is very simple. Don't support, just try it for a few days and congratulate yourself and create this kind of, this kind of movement within your peers. Exchange clothes, there's like lots of clothes swapping happening, especially for Earth Day. I wanna give a big shout out because we work with the Global Fashion Exchange, and they're an amazing group. You can look them up on Instagram, and they create these global clothing swaps in New York City, super accessible. You can download their PDF and create a clothing swap in your own home. You don't need the PDF. You can just call your girlfriends or boyfriends or friends and create these kinds of clothing swap. Moms do it a lot. I'm a mom of two, and what we try not to buy clothes. We try to donate, recycle, try to give it back and so on. And I think that it's a cultural shift that needs to happen. And until then, we're going to keep on going the same as usual and try to use the byproducts, try to work on recycling, But until we shift the way that we consume collectively, then it will be enough pressure, I guess, for the big brands to follow up, to follow through.
Yeah, so, but if you do have to buy, then you have to make a conscious choice of what you are buying. And is it gonna stay in your closet forever? Or are you gonna wear it? Are you gonna wear it regularly? How are you gonna wash it? Because a lot of these microfibers are going into our ocean as well, right? And so it's about the fabric that you choose when it comes to your clothing buying. And also the companies that you're buying from, are they transparent? Are they transparent enough to show their supply chain, to show you where they're producing? Because I've been reading a lot of on companies who are trying to get more sustainable by just using sustainable fabrics, but they don't talk about where they're producing, because they're still probably using factories that are not up to standard when it comes to that. And it's also a social aspect about human life as well, and ethically producing the pieces and garments.
Yeah, and I think it's just a very difficult time to be in fashion because we're going through the decline of certain retailers and brands who have trained consumers that you can get it really cheaply and you can return it and you can throw it away. And people don't understand how much effort it takes to still make your $5 t-shirt or your $40 or $700 t-shirt. And we've trained consumers that value is actually way lower than the price that's on the market. And so I think it's going to have to take that time for those brands and retailers to go out of business. And out of that will be a period of lots of great brands that are value and mission driven. And then that'll help reteach consumers about what things actually cost instead of often being subsidized by debt in those corporations or Silicon Valley.
So actually there's proof that they're not donating those clothes forward. They're actually shipping them to other countries, or they're just sitting in landmines they're not even using. And to your point about it being capitalistic, in order for you to make that donation, you have to walk into the store and you get a discount, which means you're more likely to buy a new H&M piece. So it's creating the same cycle. So that's really more just PR. It's not really about sustainability. It's about getting people back into the store to shop. And so it's as problematic.
To the defense of H&M, we work with ICO, who works with H&M, and they did create a capsule collection made out of recycled clothing that they've collected. That's separate from the donation, but they did get clothing from consumers, and they did turn them into a capsule collection. The capsule collection has sold out, and it's done. What are they doing next? And then Uniqlo is also trying to collect clothing. We have bigger brands like Guess are trying to do the same model. Gap is trying to do the same model. Eventually, yes, waste is a resource. Hello, waste is a resource. That's exactly what they're tapping into. They want to collect the waste from you instead of shipping it away, and they want to figure out how they're going to turn it into fiber. And so this is the future of fashion, I would say. It's going to be into using waste as a fiber and to figuring out byproducts, whether they're cotton, polyester, acrylic, all of the fabrics, mixed fabrics. That's where I think we need to focus on.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the most, I don't know if I want to say it's the most polluting, but denim it's bad news. But I've been hearing some great things about what G-Star is doing, obviously, and Everlane's making denim now. They talked about how it's a dirty business, but it's because of the wash cycle, right? Like it takes so much washing to get it up to par. Talk to me about some of the areas where, I don't know, there's great progress. Denim, we're seeing. You work in streetwear, Kristen. You don't hear a lot about sustainable fashion in the streetwear area. How come?
Well, that's because a lot of times if in t-shirts and hoodies, when you print on them, there's either water-based inks or plastic inks. And a lot of streetwear companies use plastic inks because you get a nicer, solid, opaque color. But over time, when it washes, it just crumbles, and then the plastic goes into the wash, goes into the water. So when I try to print on my fabrics, I use a water-based ink only, or I use eco and environmentally friendly natural dyes. So that's also another thing that I have to be conscious about.
That's interesting. We talked a little bit about kind of, I don't know, customers doing their homework, and you know, you should look before you buy, or you should know where your clothes are going. I am racking my brain over here. There was some amazing website that just, it went away, but you could look up the store, and it would tell you, it'll give you a grade, and this is what they're doing, and it would tell you all about how sustainable they are, really break it down. Where should people be doing their homework? What is a great resource out there that you're finding? I think there's nothing. Aww. Well, that's upsetting. How about let's go another route?
No, there are places. Eco Cult, for example, the blog Eco Cult. If you, I mean, I know it has the word cult in it, but it's a really cool blog. She's amazing. She lists all the brands. If you go into like what to buy, where to buy, bathing suits or apparel and so on. Now, again, what she's listing are local designers, small designers. The price point is pretty high for some of the stuff that are being made. Even for local designers, like even in Lebanon, when I go there and I want to buy local, the price point is way higher than what we are used to, unfortunately. But when we are supporting these designers, I would love for us to start thinking about how long are we going to wear this piece? What's the cost per wear about the piece that we're about to purchase? The cost per wear is the cost per times you're going to wear the item. And so, and also when you buy these items, oftentimes you don't need to wash them because they're handmade, or they're, you know, the care of the item is different than fast fashion, where you just throw it in the wash and you don't even think about it. You put whatever thing you have on it. But caring for your items is something that we also need more education around. Like, for example, for wool, I don't know about you, but I wash my wool with shampoo, okay? And I try to dry it flat and so on, and I don't put it in the machine as much as possible. I try to wash my things by hand, but of course it's time consuming. But that is what sustainability is about. It's about slowing down and being connected with the things. But resources, apart from EcoCult, there's if you go to the library.eco, there's a bunch of information there. But there's, I'm sure if maybe after this panel we can put a list together. I'm sure we all have a list of things to share with people. Go ahead.
But I think we also need to be realistic. Social media is the biggest hindrance to sustainable fashion, in the sense of once people feel like everybody who follows them sees what they wear, they don't want to wear it again. And that's real, and that's especially amongst millennials and Generation Z. So one of the reasons why fast fashion works so well is because you can have a whole new look on Friday that you can never wear again, and you don't feel bad because you just paid $15 for that dress. So sustainable fashion has to be realistic. Yes, you can tell people to reuse your clothes, wear multiple times, but a lot of people are doing it for the gram. And if they're doing it for the gram, then they're not really caring. They just want to look good. It's the image making of it. And it's not about the realness of that piece that you're wearing. And I think we have to be real, especially for generations coming up behind us, because they're really doing it for social media, and that matters more to them than how much wear they can get out of each piece.
They should keep the tag and return it after the gram.
Go ahead. It is all about the gram. I mean, it's a very good point. Yes, I don't want to wear the same thing, but go ahead.
I want to answer your question about why denim is so dirty. Because yeah, everybody wears denim, everybody wears jeans, but a lot of times it's made of just regular cotton and not organic cotton. And regular cotton takes a lot of pesticides and it takes a lot of wash to get the chemical dyes out of it. So there's a Fashion Revolution. They have the zines, and in it they talk about how to repurpose your denim and how to make it beautiful and to embroider on it or just patch it up, and that's a way to keep it going. But there's also organic cotton denim, but and other materials, but you don't always have to just buy the regular cotton denim. So that's something else to be conscious about.
That makes sense.
I wanted to address it was a really good question you asked earlier about resources. And I can think of one or two, and you mentioned one of them, EcoCult. But what I really want, one of my goals over the next year or so is as I'm working with sustainability designers, is to create those resources here. Let's you know, when we have a great meeting like this, we have a great meetup, let's plan to create one and create this massive website that has all kinds of resources that everybody contributes to. And so you just start in New York and you just start making it happen. And another thing I want to try to do, is you mentioned accessibility, is where are the storefronts? How can we get together and create retail outlets so you can walk into a store, see a bunch of awesome sustainability designers and see and learn about, you know, how they're produced and kind of become part of the culture. We need space, we need spaces, and so much of the spaces are taken up by the H&Ms and in the large, you know, fashion outlets, but there's space in the city all over the place, in Harlem and Brooklyn and Manhattan and Bronx. So I'm really also trying to push for that. So the more you guys can think about how do we acquire spaces so that we can all participate in them, and then how can we create these web resources that we can also all participate in.
Definitely. We're going to take a little bit of a turn, but everything is very interlinked. Definitely what you're doing, Nika, with 3D printing, 3D knitting. Definitely want to touch on technology. And like everything we've talked about on the sustainability side, it's because of advances in technology and what's happening and what's able to make this possible. Let's talk about this. Why is 3D printing, 3D knitting, 3D, what you're up to? You'll tell us about it. But this is still up and coming, and is it as complicated as it seems?
Yeah, yes and no. So 3D knitting conceptually is like 3D printing in that you're adding layers and it's building up, but we're doing it with yarn as opposed to plastics, and it sort of, you know, knits your socks. And so some of the advantages of doing that is that it's seamlessly made. Everything, so our socks have absolutely no seams, and things like our sweaters come in fully fashioned, so they naturally have 30% less wastage in just cutting and sewing. And then a sweater can come out fully made. So that means for all of our products, we can also do granular sizing, which means that we're getting you that exact item you want so that you're not returning it, which is great for our business. So the technology is super new. We got into it because we were so excited. Our backgrounds were not fashion, and we just saw it as consumers that this was an amazing technology. We could do so much with it. One machine can produce all of these different products, but the difficult part is programming because it's so new. We had to become 3D knitwear programmers. And then talking about, like, there's still a huge human element in it. So even though we like to say, like, everything is made with humans and robots, because even though it's made with robots in Brooklyn, there's a huge human component. So there's still a lot of steaming and washing and drying and re-steaming and packaging, and all that stuff happens in the US. So it takes a big team of AI and people.
I mean, it's pretty amazing, and you get your item on demand. I mean, it's definitely changing. It has a lot of possibility about what can happen for the in-store experience. I know, is it Missions? I can't think of the name of it. Ministry of Supply, excuse me, that does in-store 3D printing. And there's definitely, I mean, technology is changing the in-store experience for sure. A lot is happening with virtual reality and augmented reality. Can we just kind of touch on, it doesn't have to be related to sustainable fashion at all, but what were you gonna say, Mikaila? What are you seeing and what's exciting to you?
I got an email today, probably anybody on Zara's email list, or got an email today that they're now doing, I think in 2 weeks, where you can go into the store and hold up your phone over a barcode and you can see models actually interacting in the clothing that they're making. And so that's tech. So I think a lot of people, when they think fashion and tech, they think 3D printing because it's so amazing and so innovative, but it's also incredibly expensive, and it's also a large learning curve if you're not techie. And I think a lot of small local sustainable brands need to start thinking outside of the box. Something as simple as having a hologram, or figuring out, in the same way that Zara is, that people get to interact with your clothes in a more technological way. It will broaden the scope of their audience.
Absolutely, go ahead.
And I would just want to add about 3D printing. Recently on Instagram, someone posted a picture of a 3D printed Oscar. You know, the Oscar that you get, and the person said that's sustainable because it was 3D printed, and so there was no labor around that object. And I just happened to, you know, my studio is just in front of the big factory, the big Brooklyn factory, like an old Brooklyn factory where all the Oscars for all the Oscar shows have been made by hand by these two brothers, and they're now in their 90s. And I'm thinking to myself, I wonder what the rest of the world thinks about sustainability and 3D printing. And I Googled it. I found an article on the World Bank about how the biggest, the projection of the next biggest refugee crisis is going to be when labor is going to be replaced by 3D printing and technology. And again, to your point about what's sustainable, then is this sustainable? What are we going to do with these people? What are we going to do with labor, with artisanship, craftsmanship, knowledge of wisdom and culture and all of that? Are we going to just replace that with a machine? And so my question is yes to 3D printing for when it's a waste reduction, but when it is replacing labor and eliminating artisanship, we have a problem again at hand.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Ira. Pass it on down.
Well, I think that as a person who works in technology, I think that we always look at things like it's the kind of end of the world. But if you look at every single technology that happened since before we were born, okay, like when people started the Industrial Revolution, people were concerned that jobs and things like that, there are definitely going to be effects. There's also going to be benefits. So if we just stayed in neutral, which is not man's normal human sort of way of doing things, we wouldn't have the advances in medicine, and we wouldn't have a lot of other things. So we always have to like look at both sides and realize that there's going to be a plus and minus to everything. And we do still live in like a free market society, and it's really not, there's no one person in the world that can just say, well, it's okay for us to take this far, but not that far. So, you know, we kind of hope that everything will be okay. And if we look at, you know, when the fax machine came out, it was such a big change, and then text messaging, and then I have kids and everybody's like, oh, they're always on the phone. But this is just, for us, it's something unique. But for them, it's normal. It's just like watching TV.
It's not the end of the world. It's just technology. Okay, we are going to turn it over to questions from the audience now. If anyone has any questions for our amazing panelists.
Hi. I have a question regarding sustainable technology. I know that technology is not very sustainable, but I'm not sure what MIT is doing, or anyone who's aware of any possibilities of what sustainable tech could look like or is currently looking like. So just kind of open question to that.
So I know of a couple of projects at MIT. One of them is in 3D printing fur, and so working on a technology that 3D prints fur. It's interesting because in one sequence you can print something that's like as rigid as a brush all the way to as fluffy as a feather. However, the material is problematic. It is plastic at the end of the day, and they are now looking into using a biodegradable material, the same kind of technology that is used in your teeth when you're 3D printing the thing for the cavity. I don't know the name in English, but the plombage in French. The what? The filling, yeah, the filling. And so they're using that same kind of technology to be able to print that fur so that it would be biodegradable. So there's a big idea around circularity, not circular economy, but literally circularity. Another project at MIT where they're using crab shells, grinding them, turning them into powder, 3D printing buildings, 3D printing objects with them. They contain the same properties as the crab shells. So when you are printing them transparent and translucent, they're flexible, and when they are opaque, they are rigid, and so they kind of borrow the same properties as I'm butchering this whole thing. You should just go to MIT, ask them. I'm just translating what I know in my words. But there are a lot of ideas out there, and in MIT where we're looking at circularity, waste as a resource. Changing culture is one of the big things I'm working on, but for the technology idea of it is an idea of biodegradable is a very big one, and adaptable to the environment is another one that I know is there.
So there are three ways that we're using technology to make sustainable clothing. One way is to use a lot of digital printing because we could use a water-based ink, and the traditional way of using the screen printing is they use a lot of plastisol ink. And the second way is by using a pattern making program that gets us the least waste, because we want to do as much zero waste pattern making as possible to make our clothes fit, all the pieces fit together, and use as not have any waste at the end of the marking process. And then third way that we're using technology is at my team, we're working on doing a chatbot program where we could have people in countries where they're producing a lot of garments for bigger companies, but they're not getting their voice not being heard. So we're trying to empower them by giving them a voice through a chatbot, a survey where they could answer questions. And we can use this data to collect, and we're going to collect this data so that we could know what's going on in the factories, so that if there's any abuse going on, or if there's any building code violations or fire code violations, so that we could get the information to the right authorities.
Hi everyone, my name is Lei. I'm a design student at Parsons. I'm really interested in sustainable fashion because I know it's the biggest polluting industry in the world, and lots of factories are like in my home country, in like the third world country that really needs help. So I try to design using like sustainable methods, but I feel so limited because of the knowledge that's given for fashion students. I try to do zero waste and using upcycling fabrics, but then I'm also interested in technology and then like how like things can be biodegradable and how the fabric, like the fabric processes. So what would your advice be to like, for fashion designers for the future overall, they have access to like technology and then collaborating with interdisciplinary areas so that when we come up, we can actually make some change?
I think it's important to have that conversation. I think that fashion and tech, in many ways, they're two different camps and they need to work in conjunction. A couple weeks ago, I was at Cornell, and their program, they have a textile program that they're trying to figure out a way to recycle fabrics. And they're having a really hard time with that because their fashion students aren't tech. They don't know how to code. And so I think there's this big movement now around teaching kids how to code, kids who code, and letting them know that some of the skills that they're learning can definitely be part of something that's a financial industry, but it also can be part of the fashion industry, and having that conversation. And I would suggest to you to talk to some people in tech degrees and tell them the issues that you're facing. They're incredibly smart. There's hackathons that you can go to and maybe present fashion issues as issues that they can tackle, but there needs to be a much broader conversation between the two industries. And right now, I think one is seen as cerebral and one is seen as aesthetic, but they need to be talking.
My advice to students who are looking to work in sustainability when they come out of school is to work for companies that are sustainable instead of working for other companies that are not. So that's the best way to learn, and to learn from the people who are already doing it. And I know they're in every country, I think there are some, maybe a small group of people, but they are still doing it. So if you look for what it is in your country.
Glad you're here. And one of the groups that I've worked with at the Green Festival is a group called the NOMI Network. And something that they do is they work with sustainable fashion. And actually their main fashion designer came from Parsons, and she was named the Sustainable Fashion Designer of the Year a couple of years ago. And what they do is they work with people who have been victims of domestic abuse and the slave trade and everything in India and Cambodia. And they go in there and they actually have created cooperatives and pull these women into the cooperatives, and they empower them to work and to work with fashions they create here, and then they put them together in India and Cambodia, and then they sell them through Western outlets, through Walmart and Amazon and Saks Fifth Avenue and that kind of thing. So that's a great place, and they're always looking for innovation. So I think that might be a good place for you to check out. NOMI Network, N-O-M-I. So.
And I think through collaboration, one more thing is that if you are interested in these recycled fibers, look outside the institution for collaborations, maybe across universities. Again, the education system, like you said, is very siloed. Unfortunately, that's how we ended up with plastic. The guy who invented it never talked to an ecologist, you know? He never talked to somebody who was gonna be like, the properties are gonna be a problem for the environment. And so in fashion, it's the same problem we have where we are siloed against technology, and it's very hard to find ways. So collaboration would be one of them, and to look into fibers and fabrics and artisanships that you can incorporate into your work would be great.
Go ahead.
Hi. So I'm interested mostly in the education of young children. I have a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old grandchildren. They're women and they love clothing. But I would love for them to understand what you folks are talking about. Is there any kind of an organization, or are you guys willing to get into the school system and start really teaching people what real sustainability is about? I mean, they already know how to recycle plastic bottles, but we're talking about clothes, and they spend a lot of money on clothing.
Okay. So teach them how to sew. Teach them how to, teach them how to mend clothing, you know, and I do a lot of lectures at Parsons, and I'm going to do some at FIT soon. And I'm thinking of starting a podcast, and I probably will do it in the next few months to bring it to on a basic level, because there are a lot going on right now, a lot of information going on, but it's just too dense. Like I would have to listen like a few times to a lot of things just to get the idea of it, you know. But I would like to bring the information to the very basic level, so even children or anyone who's just any consumers who are very interested in this space, but they don't know where to start buying clothes, where to start, what kind of materials they're looking for. So I'm gonna bring it to the most basic level, like what materials are good, what materials are, you know, not too good for the environment, and that kind of thing. So yes. So yeah, so you know, check out my website when I will have it out on my blog soon, the podcasts and things when I'm starting them. Yes.
Okay, you guys, that is going to do it. These panelists are going to be here for a little bit. If you have more questions, you can corner them before you leave. But thank you guys. Thanks. Let's give a hand to our panelists tonight.